Pope Benedict XVI said something that shook two religious worlds forever. And no, it wasn't about celibacy or liturgical changes. It was a single quote he made in 2006 at the University of Regensburg that literally provoked violent protests, burning churches, and a worldwide diplomatic earthquake. If you are a Christian and have never known the real details of this story, you are missing out on one of the deepest lessons about faith and reason. If you're not a Christian, get ready to discover why this German theologian is considered one of the greatest intellectuals of our time. Because in the next few minutes, the true arguments of Joseph Ratzinger on Islam that even practicing Catholics don't fully know will be revealed. And there's a revelation about what happened behind the scenes at the Vatican at the end of this video that will leave you stunned about how the Church reacted internally. So stick around until the end. During 15 years of exclusive study of the writings of Pope Benedict XVI, analyzing more than 3,000 pages of his academic texts, from his time as a professor in Tübingen to his papal encyclicals, one thing becomes clear: 90% of people, including practicing Catholics, have no idea of the intellectual genius of this man. In the next few minutes you will discover the four most shocking truths that Benedict XVI revealed about interreligious dialogue, the 600-year-old quote that changed the modern history of religions, why he said that religious violence is contrary to the nature of God, what 138 Muslim intellectuals replied that no one has publicized, and the true theological reason behind the biggest controversy of the 21st century. What most people don't understand about the Regensburg address is that it was not a statement against Islam. And Pope Benedict XVI didn't just quote a Byzantine emperor randomly, he built the most sophisticated philosophical argument on faith and reason of the last 500 years. The difference between media sensationalism and the genius of Benedict XVI is that while journalists focused on a controversial phrase, Ratzinger developed a revolutionary thesis on how different religions can dialogue through rationality. While other popes give diplomatic speeches, Benedict XVI did high-level theology because he understood that superficiality does not build real bridges. Let's get straight to the point. On September 12, 2006, at the University of Regensburg, Benedict XVI dropped a theological bomb that few understood at the time. He quoted the Byzantine Emperor Manuel II Paleologos, who in 1391 said, "Show me just what Muhammad brought that was new, and there you will find things only evil and inhuman, such as his command to spread by the sword the faith he preached." And he proved this in a surprising way. First, he showed that this was not his personal opinion, but a 600-year-old historical document. But wait, this is not intellectual escapism. Ratzinger used this quote to make a much deeper point about the relationship between violence and faith. He then came to the conclusion, any religion that uses violence contradicts the very nature of God. Second, he noted that interreligious dialogue has all the elements of a complex philosophical problem, a historical element, on how different civilizations have interacted over the centuries, a theological element, on what each faith teaches about God and truth, a rational element, on how we can dialogue without relativizing deep convictions, and a practical element, on how to build real peace between different peoples. But here's the brilliant part, Ratzinger didn't attack Islam directly. He said that the problem is not a specific religion, but any form of fundamentalism, including scientific and secularist fundamentalism. Religious violence is anti-rational, not just anti-Christian. But he asked, how can we have true dialogue without compromising the truth? And then he went further. He said that the problem is not having strong convictions, but using these convictions to justify irrationality, be it physical violence or total relativism. This is fundamentalism, not religious fidelity. And it is fundamentalism that contradicts itself, because it destroys exactly what it should protect, the sincere search for God. In 2007, in response to the criticism, he was even more direct. He said that the West was suffering from pathologies of religion and reason. Not because it rejected dialogue, but because he saw that when you completely separate faith from rationality, what's left is not tolerance, but indifference. And indifference does not build real bridges. But that was just the beginning. What Benedict XVI discovered about the worldwide reaction is even more disturbing. And the way he dealt with violent protests caused a silent transformation in global interreligious dialogue. The media said he offended Muslims. But when you analyze Vatican documents from the following months, you discover something completely different. Now get ready for the most surprising part. On September 25, 2006, just 13 days after the controversy, Pope Benedict XVI received Muslim representatives and ambassadors from Islamic countries at Castel Gandolfo. The media said he apologized. But when you read the official documents, you discover something completely different. Ratzinger did not apologize for the quote. He made a theological clarification about academic method versus personal positioning. And his conclusions are fascinating. He explained that using historical sources to illustrate philosophical arguments is different from endorsing every word of those sources. He used the example of St. Thomas Aquinas, who quoted pagan philosophers to build Christian arguments. The media stopped there. But Ratzinger used this meeting to make a much deeper point. He said that the problem is not interreligious dialogue, but superficial dialogue that avoids difficult questions. In true dialogue, he said, each party can maintain their deepest convictions. Christians can affirm that Jesus is God. Muslims can affirm that Muhammad is the last prophet. Jews can maintain their unique understanding of the covenant. The problem arises when these convictions are used to justify violence or contempt for others. But he identified a problem: both religious fundamentalists and radical secularists were making the same mistake. Religious fundamentalism, through a literalism that ignores context. Radical secularism, through a relativism that denies any objective truth. And here's the brilliant insight: Ratzinger said that pathology of religion is what makes dialogue impossible, not doctrinal differences. Because when you use faith to justify irrationality, you can justify anything. The solution? He proposed reciprocal purification. Each religious tradition must purify its own extremisms, but based on universal reason, not just superficial diplomacy. He said that we must recognize common religious values but without denying real differences, because only in this way can we have genuine mutual respect. 3 years later, he received a letter signed by 138 Muslim intellectuals from 43 countries. Why? Because his goal was never to attack Islam, but to raise the level of global interreligious dialogue. In 2007, Joseph Ratzinger made a prophecy about the future of religions that seemed straight out of a science fiction movie, but it is happening exactly now. He said that both religious fundamentalism and secularist fundamentalism would create a global crisis of meaning. That societies would lose the ability to distinguish between conviction and fanaticism. That, precisely for this reason, there would be a return of the search for God, but also an increase in pathological religiosities. Look at the details of the prophecy. The exclusion of the divine from the universality of reason is disastrous for humanity. Pathologies of religion and pathologies of reason feed each other. The dialogue of cultures and religions is necessary for human survival. A check on the prophecy. Today we see the simultaneous increase of religious fundamentalism and anti-religious militancy. Global cultural wars. Polarization that prevents rational dialogue. But the most impressive part is that he specifically predicted that the Christian faith would be attacked by both religious and secular extremism. Ratzinger predicted that Christians would become a persecuted minority both in totalitarian countries and in progressive societies, and this is happening both in the Middle East and in Europe and North America. But perhaps the most touching revelation is about how this event personally transformed Pope Benedict XVI. During the months following the speech, Ratzinger went through one of the deepest crises of his pontificate. And this completely changed his pastoral approach. Internal Vatican documents reveal that Benedict XVI was genuinely shocked by the violence of the reaction. Churches were burned. Christians were killed in some countries. Diplomats pressured the Vatican to control the Pope. What few people know is that Ratzinger seriously considered resigning as early as 2007 because of this crisis. Close cardinals dissuaded him, but this explains why he became even more careful with later public statements. In a private letter to Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone, he wrote, "My intention was purely academic, but I discovered that a pope cannot speak only as a professor. Every word has consequences that go beyond intentions." This experience shaped his ecclesiology in a way that few realized. That's why when he published the encyclical Caritas in Veritate 2 years later, it wasn't just about social doctrine, but about how to communicate difficult truths with genuine charity. And now, the story I promised you at the beginning. The real impact that no one told you about this event. Everyone thinks that the Regensburg address harmed interreligious dialogue. But documentary evidence suggests the exact opposite. In the 5 years following the speech, the Vatican established more interreligious dialogue commissions than in the previous 2 decades. Catholic universities created specific courses on Islam. The Pontifical Institute for Arabic and Islamic Studies expanded its programs. What really happened was that Ratzinger forced both Christians and Muslims to go beyond diplomatic pleasantries to substantial issues. This explains why moderate Muslim leaders began to openly criticize extremists in their own communities and why Christian theologians deepened their studies on other religious traditions. The letter from the 138 Muslim intellectuals reveals that they did not just forgive the Pope. They thanked him for raising the level of dialogue. One of the signatories wrote, "Finally a religious leader who treats us as adults capable of serious debate." But there's more. The current dialogue between the Vatican and Al-Azhar, the main Islamic university in the world, began directly as a consequence of this event. Documents show that leaders of both institutions realized that diplomatic superficiality did not resolve real tensions. So, after all this, one thing is clear: Joseph Ratzinger was not an anti-Islamic pope. He was an intellectual who refused to treat deep religious issues with politically correct superficiality. A man who risked his reputation to raise the standard of interreligious dialogue and came to conclusions that bother both religious fundamentalists and militant secularists. His ideas about faith and reason, violence and religion, and intercultural dialogue were not irresponsible provocations. They were theological insights based on decades of academic and pastoral study. And perhaps the most important lesson is that true dialogue requires courage to address real differences, not just celebrate superficial similarities. As he said, the dialogue of cultures and religions is not an option, but a vital necessity for our time. If this has changed your perspective on Pope Benedict XVI and interreligious dialogue, leave a comment. Which part of this story impressed you the most? And if you know someone who still thinks this speech was just religious intolerance, share this video. In the next videos, we will delve even deeper into Benedict XVI's social encyclicals and how they prophesied the current crisis of global capitalism. Until then, continue to seek the truth with courage and charity.